everyone, welcome back. My name is Morgan. This is my channel, Pisces Paperbacks, and today I want to talk about all the books I read in November. I'm actually filming this in the morning on November 29th, and I do expect I'm going to finish books in the next 2 days, like today and tomorrow. But today is also the beginning of the Romance Takeover Readathon, which runs until December 11th. So in order to keep those all within the same month, I'm just cutting my November off today, and November is only going to count the first 28 days of the month. I hope that made sense. This month I read 9 books. 5 of them were audiobooks, 3 of them were ebooks because I love my Kindle, and 1 of them was a physical book. And let's get into it. The first book I read was Nunshaw Sleep by Ellie Marney, and I gave this book 4.5 stars. I really liked it a lot more than I expected to. It's a YA contemporary thriller, and it's definitely like at the crossroads of Criminal Minds and Silence of the Lambs, and I was obsessed with it. It's basically about Emma, and she is a college student who is recruited by the FBI to interview teenage serial killers. As she and her fellow teenage interviewer, Travis, I believe his name was, get deeper into the interviews, they start to realize that there's some stuff the FBI isn't quite telling them, especially when it comes to teenage serial killer Sebastian, who seems to have a particular interest in Emma. And I was just so into this book. I really love every single character. I thought the climactic scene was like so energetic and interesting, and like I was on the edge of my seat, metaphorically. This book deals a lot with trauma, and Emma is dealing with a lot of PTSD from a situation that happens prior to the book starting. I don't remember if it was a spoiler or not, so I'm not really gonna say it, but I just absolutely fell in love with this book. I kind of want to buy my own copy, to be honest, but I haven't quite decided yet. I will say one weird thing is at the end of the audiobook, it was like, thanks to our narrators, and listed off 4 people, and I swear to you, I did not even notice the second 2 voices. Like, I thought it was just 2. I thought it was a primary female narrator and then like one guy who was only there sometimes, like not even in the chapters from Travis's point of view. And it was just like very odd. Maybe his name was Trevor. I don't remember. It was something with a T for sure. And I just was kind of thrown off at the end when I was like, there was 2 more narrators that I just, their voices were just not distinct enough for me to notice, or like, did I miss something? It was just very odd, but I really like loved this book. Next up, I read Her Lady to Love by Jane Walsh, and this was a NetGalley arc that I received, and it was released on November 10th, I believe. This is a sapphic female-female historical romance about, I forget their names, but it was a country mouse who's kind of come to the city, come to London to find a husband, and a city girl who never wants to get married but is now kind of skirting the edge of ruin with her reputation. And when the city girl promises to help the country girl find a husband, their friendship blossoms into something more. Unfortunately, while I was really excited to read this because it would be my first female-female historical romance, I was very disappointed in this book. I just found the plot to be so vapid in a lot of ways. Like, the characters, it was a lot of miscommunication, and I am someone who does not mind miscommunication as like a plot device in romances. I find it very funny. I find it horrible in movies, but I find it very funny in books. But this was just like too much. For example, in one scene, they're out at an event, and the country girl, oh my god, I need to give them names. Okay, so city girl Anna is helping country girl Chrissy have some alone time with the Duke. And from their perspectives, you hear city girl Anna go, if she really liked me, wouldn't she like hesitate to go off and have alone time with this Duke? Clearly she doesn't like me. And then from Chrissy's perspective, you hear, if Anna really liked me, wouldn't she hesitate to set me up to have alone time with the Duke, even though I basically blackmailed her into helping me do this? Like, she clearly doesn't like me. And it was just like that kind of misunderstanding. It was just so, a lot of crossed wires that just didn't need to be crossed. Generally, I was just unfortunately not a fan of this one. I found it very frustrating, and I gave it like 2 stars. Then I read an even worse romance called Sweet Vengeance by Kat Martin. I actually have it right here. Let me hold it up. This is about a viscount named Rain and a woman named Jocelyn, and the book starts with Jocelyn trying to kill Rain because she blames him for the events that led to her father dying in a fire. Rain like captures her and brings her back to his house, and then literally that first night he like threatens to have sex with her to like show her who's boss, but then she's like, oh, and then he's like, oh, I saw fear in your eyes because it turns out you didn't want me and I could never force a woman. And I'm like, why did you threaten it then? Also, when they're in like their first scene together, he threatens to spank her for misbehaving, and I'm like, you just met this woman. Then he asks her to be his mistress, and she agrees despite the fact that she's 17. She's not 18 yet, and it explicitly says that. It could have left it like ambiguous and just said she was like young or late teens, early 20s, but no, it's specifically she's like, I'm 17 and turn 18 at the end of the month. And I'm just going to tell you like the whole plot of this book because I don't want you to read this, but basically she starts to realize that she's falling in love with him, and then he gets shot and almost dies and blames her for, like, she's set up to look like she's like she tried to kill him. And then she's sent on a prison ship to Jamaica and starts working as like a waitress who's like owned by someone there doing prison time. And then he goes to Jamaica to like find her because he still thinks that she tried to kill him, but he for some reason can't stand the thought of her suffering. So he goes out there after having bought a coffee farm and then buys her back and sets her up as like a worker at his own farm so he can keep an eye on her. And then he just hates her because he thinks she killed him even though he was starting to fall in love with her. And then like several times they have sex when he still hates her, and every single time it starts by him like threatening to lay hands on her sexually and he's like, you know, you love me, you know, you react to me. And every time she's like, no, and he's like, oh wait, I can't force you, I'm not that kind of guy. And then she's like, oh, we could have sex because now I know you wouldn't assault me. Also, there's some very questionable race stuff in here, like very questionable. And by questionable, I mean caricaturish depictions of slave women. And it's not good. I do love the cover page, though. Is that not the most, like, romance genre thing you've ever seen? It's such a shame. Also, this book is in incredible condition for something that was published and printed in 1993. So, clearly no one wanted to read it. And I'm probably going to get rid of it, but we'll see eventually. Up next, I read Girls Made of Snow and Glass by Melissa Bashardoust, I believe her last name is pronounced. And this is a YA fantasy reinterpretation of Snow White. God, I forget their names too. Ugh, I'm really bad with names right now. I don't know why. Basically, it follows two girls. One of them is the daughter of a magician, and she has a heart of glass and can't feel emotions. And the other is the princess, the daughter of the king, who was made by the magician in the image of her mother out of snow. And my problem with the book is basically exactly what I just said. One of the girls has a glass heart, the other girl is made out of snow. The title of the book is Girls Made of Snow and Glass, and all of that information is available in like the synopsis on Goodreads. It's just, to me at least, the book felt like it was all surface level. One girl's made of snow, one girl's made of glass. The name of the book is Girls Made of Snow and Glass, and there was like nothing really underneath. I read this book for a sapphic book club that I recently joined, and I'm very excited to continue to read more of the books with them. This was just like not the one for me, unfortunately. The book is really about the bond between the princess and the other woman who ends up being her stepmother, and obviously Snow White retelling, there's a whole stepmother thing involved. And there were some aspects of it I found pretty interesting, but generally I wasn't particularly inspired by it. That could also be because I'm an adult now and I read much less YA than I thought I did. And I think it's because I oftentimes find YA less developed than I'm wanting it to be, or I find it very predictable. I definitely think I'm just not the target audience for this book anymore, and that's okay. So I felt like this book was like a 2.5, but I'm probably just going to rate it a 3 because I know that the book is objectively better than the way I feel about it, if that makes sense. I don't know. The next book I read was Trick Mirror by Tolentino. This is a nonfiction essay collection about self-image, self-perception, and the things in our life that influence those. And I found it very interesting. I didn't love it. I've read essay collections that I just liked more. They felt more emotionally connected to me, but I really liked a lot of the points she was trying to make, and I found some of her perspectives really interesting. I read this for a book club that I have with 2 of my friends, like we buddy read books, and I haven't discussed it yet with them, so I don't really know haven't really worked through my thoughts about this book yet, but I did enjoy it, and it's kind of in the 3.5, 4-star range. Up next, I read A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik, and this is a new fantasy by her about a school that basically tries to kill its students. It's just like infested with monsters, and you graduate if you survive, and you either graduate or die. And the main character is a girl named Elle. Her name's Galadriel, but they call her Elle. She has an affinity for extremely destructive magic, and she really resents Orion, the school golden boy, who just keeps saving her life. And there's not really a plot, and this book is extremely heavy on world-building info dumps, and the characters are either the main characters or they're not developed, and the atmosphere is very weird, but I loved this book. I thought it was so fun. I really loved the characters. I loved their relationships. I loved the dynamics between them. I love Elle. I thought she was so great and snarky. I thought the descriptions were really dark and cool. Actually, I was watching like a book club discussion about this book earlier, like last week, and something they talked about was like, is it YA, is it adult? And one of the people in the book club was like, it's definitely adult because the descriptions like went to the dark place that YA doesn't really go. And I guess that's true. Honestly, as I was reading it, thought it was YA, and I thought it was just like a really good YA that I really liked, but maybe it's just because it was an adult book that I liked it so much. But I was obsessed, even though there's literally no plot. The plot is just them, like Elle making friends and trying to get through the year. There's like not really a mystery. I think the second book in the series is really going to have more of a mystery thread through the plot. Maybe, I don't know. And it's just like, this book has been very divisive. There have been a couple of reviews that mentioned some passages that seemed particularly insensitive in terms of race, and I completely agree. There's this one particular passage talking about locks as a hairstyle that I think is unneeded and unnecessary and shouldn't have been added, and it won't be included in future printings. But I feel like a lot of other criticisms of the book were taken really out of context, and within the context of the book, things make a lot more sense. Then again, I'm not the end-all be-all decision maker on like what is a valid complaint. Obviously, I am not the person to be making those judgments, but I did just really enjoy this book. I also gave it a 4.5 stars, although I think None Shall Sleep was my favorite book of the month, but I don't know. The next two books I read were Haven and Sanctuary by Rebekah Weatherspoon, and these are the first and second books in her Beards and Bondage series. In the first one, a girl named Claudia is on a camping trip with her brother when they're attacked by like killers, and her brother is killed, and she runs through the forest and ends up on the doorstep of Shep, a nature photographer who lives like in the mountains in Northern California. After rescuing her, they kind of have like a bonding moment at the hospital, and then they don't see each other again for 6 months until she like shows back up on his doorstep, and they embark on like a relationship exploration of control, dominant, submissive stuff. I really liked it. I thought the end like wrapped up a little too fast. I want it to be a little bit more dramatic, but I really enjoyed this book. I thought the sex scenes were like, whew, sexy, steamy. Oh my god. But I really enjoyed it, and I liked the second one even better. So the second one is about Claudia's friend Liz, who's an attorney in New York City. When a former client who was disappointed in her work puts out a hit on her, she decides to hide out in the upstate New York for a while at the farm of her coworker and friend's brother. And so the brother's name is Silas. I love him. He's so like straightforward and blunt and honest, and I just appreciate that so much. And then they, of course, develop a relationship, and I just adored their relationship in this book. They were so like straight up with each other. There was no like fucking around in terms of communication, and I really appreciated that. And again, I wish there was a little bit more drama in the conclusion, because that's just like who I am, is what I want. But I loved this book so much. I still give it a 4. I don't know why, but I still gave it a 4. I really want to read the third one, but I have library cards to 2 different library systems, and neither of them have a copy of the third one, which is like bullshit. So I will just suffer and figure it out. So we'll see. And lastly, I listened to Fever Dream by Samanta Schweblin, and this is a pretty short, the audiobook's only 3 hours long, horror novella about a conversation between a woman dying in a hospital bed and a young boy sitting next to her who is not her son. And that's really like all the information I had going in. It's very creepy. It's very like disorienting and surreal. I did not understand a lot of what was going on, and I did have to like look stuff up afterwards to like look up reviews and discussions to see if I could get a little bit more context or understanding. But I did like it. I definitely think it did its job of making me feel so thrown off. I mean, it's called Fever Dream. And I also think that it made me extremely unsettled in a way that like had me pacing. It was very stressful. The book shouldn't have taken me so long to read because I was listening to it on like 1.75 speed. It's 3 hours long, and yet it took me 2 days to read it because I was like reading it in little bits, very stressed. And I liked it. I did give it 3 stars, so it wasn't like a huge winner for me, but it definitely wasn't like a loser. So yeah, it is translated. This book was originally written and published in Argentina in 2014, but it was translated to English in 2017. All right, that is all 9 books I read this month. Feeling really good. I already told you my TBR for the Romance Takeover Readathon, so I'll link that above if you want to see what I'm going to be starting to read in like the next 2 days. But I feel really good about November. I'm also in the middle of Plain Bad Heroines by Emily M. Danforth, and I'm only 50 pages in, and I'm fucking obsessed with it. Like, I watched a review by Beautifully Bookish Bethany, and she says that you should read this book if you liked The Starless Sea, even though this is a horror and that's like a fantasy. And honestly, that's all you had to do to sell me because I was obsessed with The Starless Sea, and I can definitely see how it's kind of related. This is like stories within stories as well. And again, 50 pages in, already obsessed. I will be reading that. Like, it will be in my next month wrap up, and maybe it'll be a favorite of the year. Who knows? That is everything I have to say. Let me know if you've read any of the books that I mentioned today and like what you thought about them. I'd love to have some conversation, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!